Don't forget to like and subscribe to stay up to date and help the channel grow. We really appreciate you spending some time with us today. And now, on with the show. You are listening to the Narrated, Not the Popular Opinion with the one and only Gray. Greetings, opinion nerds. It is I, the one they call Gray, and 'tis the season for great discomfort as we step into the gray area and look at the new holiday film Spirited and A Christmas Story Christmas coming up right now. I may not like being dragged to the party, opinion nerds, but you can get me to dance. I am not known for my love of the holidays. The fact that we need to set aside blocks of time and make up stories to give ourselves an excuse not to be complete dicks to one another for a few days out of the year is something I find deeply offensive on many levels. And Christmas movies? Those are the worst of all. A canon of films we claim are so deep and meaningful that we keep them in cold storage for most of the year before attempting to cram watching them all into the 2 free weekends we have between Thanksgiving and December 25th. So as it is with the 9,000 different versions of the same 5 Christmas songs everybody pretends to love, if someone suggests we throw on one of these so-called movies, you'll find me giving them the "hey, good idea" fingers as I slowly backpedal towards the door like a cartoon character trying to pretend they did not just walk into a room and find out that the Smurfs partake in ritualistic cannibal orgies. But I have to do this. You understand? I have to make everyone believe I hate Christmas movies. I have to do this because I carry a secret shame. One that, should it be known, would certainly change the way people look at me forever. But I'll share it with you here, as long as you promise not to think badly of me. My secret is that not only do I not hate Christmas movies, I kinda like them. Not all of them, mind you. Sure, a lot of them are just sanctimonious saccharine garbage that play on people who think getting good vibes means you need to shut off your brain and just feel around like a blind lizard on a hot desert day. But there are those films that have managed to wriggle their way into my schmaltz-averse soul and find a spot to squat. And I'm not special. I suffer from nostalgia like any other fourth-dimensional being, so things like the Peanuts Christmas Special, Scrooged, and National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation will always get my attention. I can only suffer so many funny Christmas disaster movies and none of the romantic or Remember God on Christmas ones. Nope. So I try to shoot for the top of the heap to limit my risk. But nostalgia is a drug, and being straight edge from birth, I need to make sure that I'm not just getting drunk on memorberry wine, sung like Jeff Buckley to make the "I'm still living in my 20s" analogy complete. So seeing as there were a couple of new Christmas films this year that were neither produced by the Hallmark channels made for $20 and a Panera gift card budget, nor a Christmas version of some child-oriented property that my child-free ass isn't obligated to endure to maintain a peaceful sanity in my house, I figured, fuck it. And it's with that happy attitude I took the unassailable risk of launching the Apple TV Plus app and dove into the fuck it I lost counteth take on Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol with the Will Ferrell and Ryan Reynolds starring Spirited. Spirited's twist on the Dickens mainstay is pretty unique, softly acknowledging that all the adaptations and variations of the story are essentially the same while turning the focus on the ghosts as much as the story's victims, or perp as the film calls them. And the real kicker? This film is a musical. Didn't know Ryan Reynolds could sing and dance? After this movie, you still might not be convinced he can, but man, do he and Will Ferrell put in the effort. In all honesty, though, I really didn't think this was a bad film. It's got a unique twist on the story, and its humor mostly works for a few light chuckles. It's still as predictable as a film like this is bound to be, but the ride getting there is more fun than I expected. I should have known that the combined acerbic wit of Reynolds and Ferrell wouldn't lead to the kind of emotional corn syrup I loathe, but you can never be too careful with this stuff. What I thought was the best thing about this film was also what I thought was the worst. This film makes a point of acknowledging that, in defiance of the typical message of Christmas Carol remakes and knockoffs, change doesn't happen after one long, pants-wetting night of poltergeist peril. Being good is a lifelong process that we endure every fucking day we wake up and make a promise to ourselves to keep our shittiness to a minimum. Being good is a marathon, and a really long, exhausting one at that. But you keep running it because you at least believe it's right. It's a great message, but it comes at the cost of deconstructing the very simple fable that is A Christmas Carol. The point of the Dickens story isn't that change comes because some traumatic event flipped a switch in your head. The point is that change is possible, and that even middle-aged movie bloggers can learn to be better people. To deconstruct that and explain it seems unnecessary. It's not that people don't know they have to put in the work to change, they just don't want to. The problem isn't ignorance so much as apathy, and this movie doesn't address that. But at least it's entertaining. So okay, so far so good. It's no Scrooged, but I can deal with that. In fact, I was so confident in my choice that the next night I opted for a double feature. See, it turns out my wife had never seen A Christmas Story. Not all of it, not start to finish. It was one of those movies that she would wander into while it was on and wander out of before it was over. And with the clunkily titled A Christmas Story Christmas, the third sequel in the distended adaptation of Gene Shepard's first novel, In God We Trust, All Others Pay Cash, recently premiered on HBO Max, I figured we had a chance to knock them both out. A Christmas Story is a classic film. It's one of those films that both parents and kids can watch while having entirely different experiences. Kids get a satirically relatable Christmas tale that lets them poke fun at their folks, while parents get the dual air rifle blast of nostalgia and a shared perspective on the holiday from their mature vantage point. It's theatrical with a dry wit, doesn't give a crap about the nature of Christmas as a religious holiday, and seems to have no interest in teaching a lesson or sharing a message. It's a beautiful little slice of life comedy that remains trapped in a specific time and is somehow timeless. A Christmas Story Christmas is like none of those things. Don't get me wrong, it tries hard to recreate that magic, but that might be more to its detriment than its favor. A Christmas Story Christmas ignores the other two films in the franchise, 1994's My Summer Story and 2012's boringly titled A Christmas Story 2, and brings back a chunk of the original film's kid cast as their adult versions. Most importantly, Peter Billingsley's Ralphie Parker doing his best Gene Shepard in the narrations in one of the many attempts to marry the two films together. I've never seen the other two films, and I don't care, so that's not a thing that's getting discussed. A Christmas Story Christmas has really good intentions, and it does bring the requisite humor and heart that you expect from a family film, but it's pretty predictable, and its overwhelming need to try and recreate the general vibe of the original means it doesn't have a personality of its own. It doesn't help that it's not a particularly interesting looking film. Yeah, it adds some faux film grain and tries to color correct its digital image to look like it was shot on film, but that rarely ever works, and it still looks like a made-for-TV movie, which is more or less what it is. But there are some funny moments, and it's entertaining, so it's not like it's a fall-on-its-face failure. For my money, where the film loses its battle with its older sibling is where it places its perspective. Because the film maintains the point of view of its lead character, Ralph, now a 40-something aspiring writer, its outlook is solidly from an adult vantage. Somewhat like Clark Griswold in Christmas Vacation, Ralphie is taking over Christmas duties after the death of his father, vowing to give his family a great Christmas in the old man's tradition. Add to that his year-long quest to get a book published, and outside of his kids dealing with some bullies, the film is squarely aimed at adults around Ralph's age, those who might have been kids when the first film was released. But while it's clearly told from an adult perspective, it's most definitely not an adult movie. In fact, I don't think the Christmas Vacation comparison is entirely unfair, as this movie is definitely playing in that film's sandbox. But its need to not be too tonally different from the first film ties its hand, and it just ends up feeling weightless. Die Hard is not a Christmas movie. Now, that's not just a weird aside. Even if it is true, I will not be entertaining any arguments on the subject. Spirited and A Christmas Story Christmas are classed as Christmas movies because they are, for lack of a better word, about Christmas. Die Hard might take place during Christmas, but so does Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, and in neither of those films is the Christmas holiday itself really all that important. It might take some doing, but you can take Christmas out of those movies and nothing about what happens changes. These other two films are entirely dependent on Christmas for their very existence. They are Christmas movies because Christmas is at the center of them. But while I'm not a person for whom the Christmas holiday means much of anything, it isn't the eggnog coating and swirly peppermint core of these films that generally turns me off. Most of these movies are what people like to call feel-good movies, and with very few exceptions, I do not like feel-good movies. Now, you can think whatever you want about what kind of person that makes me. I'm not really inclined to care. Whether it be a movie or a TV show, I tend to find feel-good programming tedious and predictable. The material has to get you to a certain place, and with a small margin of deviance, you can usually guess on how it's going to get there long before it does. They have to do this because if they don't create the desired emotional reaction in the end by being more complicated or nuanced or really doing anything outside of expectation, they aren't creating feel-good material. In order to be accessible to the broadest audience, the material is usually not constructed in a very interesting way, either as pieces of writing or, as with film or television, pieces of visual storytelling. They can be, and certainly some have been, but simplicity of form and clarity of communication are key to feel-good programming because they aren't looking to be niche. They want that big audience. Most of what makes each unique will rely on production design, music, and performance, the most superficially noticeable aspects of the material. If any of those is subpar or dull in any way, it can threaten to pull the whole thing down. Mostly where these things lose me is in their blatant emotional manipulation. I can't explain why, but that tugging on the heartstrings thing that happens when you have a sympathetic reaction, I don't really like that feeling. I mean, physically, I don't like the feeling of not being in control of my emotions. It's something that stretches deep into my childhood, and it's never been good for me. So the more manipulative something is, the more I push back against it. There are people who like that kind of thing, and that's great. I am not those people, and that fact colors how I approach everything I consume. It makes it very difficult to engage with this kind of stuff because I can be, and often have been, moved by something I think is an absolutely terrible piece of work, and I simply don't have the emotional bandwidth to endure that kind of thing for too long. So, like The Last of Us, I avoid that personal plague, not because I'm some cold intellectual machine that just can't relate to the human experience. I avoid it because it's fucking exhausting. It's not something I necessarily want to do. It's something I have to do to maintain my sanity. Neither Spirited nor Christmas Story Christmas are brilliant pieces of filmmaking, but neither of them ever had any aspirations to be. These aren't the kind of films you put on when you want to be challenged or have your consciousness expanded. They're the cinematic equivalent of coffee shop holiday background music, the musique d'ambiance of holiday entertainment. They don't fall apart upon examination, but that's only because there isn't much there to disassemble. They're certainly a step up from the majority of the Hallmark Channel films, but let's be honest, Hallmark Channel programming is the circus peanuts of filmmaking. They aren't good for you, but they don't really hurt, so who gives a shit? The movies have a job to do, and they each get the job done. Of the two, I certainly prefer Spirited due to my love of biting sarcasm, even if the shift in the Ryan Reynolds character feels like it's only happening because it has to, and not because of anything that's actually meaningful. It hits the target, but only because the target is the size of a Mint Mobile billboard. Just aim for the face, Ryan. That's the money shot. I don't hate the holidays. I just don't like the idea of making a big to-do about something I don't believe in but still feel obligated to take part in. While I might not be a fan of Christmas movies especially, it's not because I hate the idea of Christmas movies. It's just that most of them are terrible pieces of storytelling whose only purpose is to produce the emotional manipulation I don't want to be exposed to. So I have to be very picky about what I engage with. Spirited and A Christmas Story Christmas may not be great films, but they're far less saccharine and schmaltzy than a lot of the crap made for either families with very young children or middle-aged box wine drinking adults. And as my wife and I are dedicated to never having kids, and I don't plan on taking up drinking anything alcoholic, especially something you get from a box, those are two round holes the square peg can't be beaten into. But as cliche as it sounds, Christmas does only come once a year. Yes, it's every fucking year for the rest of your life, but since practically no one is begging to put on Frosty the Snowman in June, you only really have to put up with this stuff for a little while. So while I might not look all bah humbug to people who don't know me, the people who matter know that while I won't be manipulated, I can be convinced to participate under the right circumstances. And sometimes how you got to the party is far less important than the fact that you're there. This has been the Narrated, Not the Popular Opinion. As always, I have been Gray, and if you like what you heard, you can leave a tip at our Ko-Fi page at ko-fi.com/notthepopularopinion. You can follow us on Twitter at @only_Gray, and don't forget our main page at notthepopularopinion.wordpress.com, where you'll find more great articles just like this. Thanks again for listening, and remember, if you're as good to others as you are to yourself, we might just make it through this mess. See ya.